Over the years, I've had opportunities to counsel with people and talk with people, and sometimes those are pure joy and pure delight, and other times they are, sometimes they're miserable. When they're miserable, it's often because they don't really want my advice. They want me to tell them what they want to hear and then be able to say, well, the pastor said it was good. I'm kind of like, I don't want to be your rubber stamp. I'm not saying I know everything, but if you want to ask me something, then do you want my advice or not? I'm not even telling you necessarily to follow it unless the advice isn't my advice, it's Bible advice. Then I'll tell you you should follow it because it's there. And this makes sense, but sometimes I give advice and it's just what I think might be the best thing to do. And sometimes I tell people, I think that's a good idea, but the Bible doesn't tell you one way or the other. Why don't you pray about it? What does God want you to do? And sometimes I won't even give my advice. I'm just like, what do you think? And I let them talk and tell me and different things. And over the course of years, I've talked with people who have had different struggles with relationships. I've talked with children who have problems with their parents. Sometimes it's teenagers struggling with parents, and then I'm kind of like, I probably need to talk to your mom or your dad. And sometimes I talk with people, they have problems with their children, and they're like, what should I do? And I say, is your child in your home, or is your child 16, or is your child 8? And all those make a big difference on what you do and don't do. Sometimes parents want me to fix their adult children. And I'm like, no, it's a little late. If they come to me and say, how do I fix the relationship with my parents? Maybe, but it's hard to make a 16-year-old do what you want a 16-year-old to do, let alone an adult child. And then some of the most difficult conversations I have are in a marriage relationship. You can have all these structures and these rules in place, right? And marriages are supposed to have like some rules, right? Like don't cheat on each other. Like that's a really good rule for a marriage. God said it this way, thou shalt not commit adultery. That's a good rule, right? But you know what? You can have a relationship that everybody's been faithful to each other, but it just not feel like a relationship at all. Two people just become roommates, living in the same house, and it's less than roommates because normally roommates that partner up kind of like each other, even if they're not a couple. They might be of the same sex completely, and they like each other and they get along and they want to hang out, but two people living under the same roof, and they have a relationship and they have rules, but they don't have all that's needed. They have structure, but they have nothing further. Denise read us these verses in Galatians, and last week I ended the message in these verses, talking about the law was a guardian that brings us to Christ. And we kind of looked at it from a personal angle, but I want to look at it today not nearly as much from a personal angle, but from a societal, communal angle, which is what God gave the law to. God gave the law to a group of people, the nation of Israel. And when did He give them that law? After He had saved them from slavery in Egypt. The nation of Israel was in slavery in Egypt. They were in bondage. They were in great anguish. And they were crying out, hoping for a deliverer. And God used Moses to go to Pharaoh. And God sent all these plagues to the nation of Egypt to let Pharaoh finally say, you can go. And after the people go, after they cross the Red Sea, God parts the Red Sea, they cross it, they get out into the wilderness and they land at Mount Sinai. And Moses goes up into the mountain And it's where God gives him the law, but he gave him the law for the people, for a group. And he gave him the law as a guardian, as a keeper, as somebody to watch over them for structure. It was for structure. Do you know there's been lots of religious people? They've kept lots of laws. And laws are good things to keep. Laws are good things to keep. I'm always in somewhat of a hurry when I drive here on Sunday morning after leaving Madison Heights. And I was driving, not super fast this morning, but I was driving and I was coming down 14 Mile and I saw a police officer a little ways ahead waiting to pull on to 14 Mile. And as soon as I saw him, I looked down at my speedometer. Isn't that what we all do? You immediately look at your speedometer. Now it's 40 miles an hour right there, and my speedometer said 47. Not like horrible, right? Not 57, 47. But he was a little ways out in front, and it looked like he's more just trying to pull out to get in traffic, and I didn't even hit my brakes. I just let off that gas. Just let it coast. And then he pulled out behind me, and I said, oh, please, God, please. I've got to preach a sermon. Don't you know how important this is? Don't let him pull me over. And in my mind, like if I had been going 57, I was like, all right, you earned that one, right? But I was going 47, and we were coming down, and I was coming up to, I crossed over Rochester and through the light right there by Guardian Angels, and he was following me. And then there's the Gateway Daycare right there before Bellevue. And every time I come down 14 Mile, I don't come not every time, but almost every time, I do not come all the way to Main Street, make a left and come down the church. I turn and come down the side street, and then I come down Gladwin, and I pass Adam and Denise's house. And sometimes I'm jealous that I don't live that close, and then other times I'm glad I don't live that close. And sometimes they wish they didn't live that close. When I ask them for a key, spare key when I forgot mine, I need a key to get in the building. Or I've locked myself out a few times. And come in the door's not unlocked, I'm the only one here, I'm doing stuff, and then I go out to my car to get something while I left my other keys here, and then I'm locked out of the building. And but I'm glad they live a few doors down. And hey, are you home? But I turned down Bellevue, and he thankfully didn't follow me. But laws aren't bad. Laws aren't bad. But laws never accomplish what we fully need them to accomplish. Thou shalt not commit adultery doesn't mean you have a good marriage. Not speeding doesn't mean you're a good person. It just means you might be afraid of getting a ticket. Laws are guardians. They're meant to bring us near, but they don't accomplish the fullness. They don't accomplish the fullness. We've been having a little ongoing running joke around here about bumper stickers on cars. Church at Clawson bumper stickers. I don't want them. I don't want them. Bad idea. But do you know that the older I get and the longer I'm in the Clawson community, the more I drive carefully around here? Not because of the police officer, but because I want the community to know Jesus. And I don't want the pastor to wreck that. And so because I want the community to know Jesus, and when I'm going down side streets, I begin to think about how I want people to drive if my kids lived on that street. And what changes? I didn't think about, I wouldn't have thought so much about those things when I was 20 and 21. Maturity comes along. It's the fullness. It's the arrival point. It's the place that we need to get to. And so Denise reads this, and it kind of helps us understand our sermon where we launch in today. And we see that we are in week number 4 of 8 or 9 chapters. And we've entitled it The Guardian in the Throne. The Guardian in the Throne. The guardian here is the law. God gave the law to keep the people near where they needed to go. And so, number one, I want you to see that the law was a guardian that formed people. The law was a guardian that formed people. It says, before this, faith came. We were confined under the law, imprisoned until the coming faith was revealed. The law then was our guardian until Christ, so that we could be justified by faith. People come to Christ because they understand that they come up short. The law helps unfold this. It draws us nearer, but it doesn't get us across the finish line. But since that faith has come, we are no longer under a guardian. So Jesus has come. We're no longer under the law. It doesn't mean that we don't keep the law, but we don't keep the law because we're afraid of getting in trouble. I don't cheat on my wife because I'm afraid of getting caught. I don't cheat on my wife because I love her. People that need laws haven't arrived at the mature point yet. But laws help form and shape us. They help mold us. You need laws to help bring you near, but they never get you across the finish line. They never get you to the goal. The law was not given to create a redeemed people, but to shape a redeemed people until maturity came. God redeemed the nation of Israel out of slavery. He pulled them out of bondage. And He needed to redeem them because they fell into sin. Again, the nation of Israel, how did they end up there? How did they end up in slavery in Egypt? How did they get there? God called Abraham out of Babylon. He calls Abraham out of the Ur of the Chaldees, Iraqi area in today's modern geography. He calls them out to a land I will show you, nowhere close to Egypt. Yet somehow Abraham ends up in Egypt. And when he ends up in Egypt, he picks up a slave. Not a good idea. Not a good plan. He picks up a slave in Egypt, takes Hagar as a slave for his wife Sarah, has a child with the slave to try to fulfill God's promise, tries to make God's promises happen instead of relying upon God. And then their descendants. Abraham's grandson, Jacob, had 12 sons. And the youngest one at the time, when there was only 11, was the favorite. You've heard the story of the coat of many colors. Joseph is given a coat of many colors. His brothers, who are adults, right? Colors are hard to get a hold of. It's not modern day thing. Purple was a sign of royalty because purple was a hard color to get a hold of. It was difficult, and colors were difficult to come across. They didn't have dyes, were expensive. Those things were hard to come across. And Joseph has an expensive coat from his father. It signifies that he is loved above beyond his brothers. His brothers becoming jealous and inflamed. One day when Joseph comes to meet them way out in the field, all adult brothers, they take him. They're going to kill him. And his oldest brother's like, don't kill him. And they throw him in a pit. And then some slave traders come across. And Joseph is sold into slavery, where he lands in Egypt. Israel 2 times. The nation of Israel, the nation that's forming, has participated in evil acts. And what you sow, you reap. It's a promise from the Bible. The Bible says, be not deceived, God is not mocked. Whatever a man sows, that shall he also reap. And they end up in slavery in Egypt. But God is very compassionate God, and He says, I'm going to bring you out. I'm going to deliver you out. And He redeems them. He saves them. He gives them new hope. Aren't you glad that God forgives you? Aren't you glad that God redeems you from your sin and your mistakes and your shortcomings? I'm sure glad God does that for me, and He redeems the people out of Israel, or out of Egypt, and He gives them a law. And so He gives them this to redeem them until maturity comes. The law was to bring them near, but it never gets them over the finish line. In Exodus 19, this is just before God gives the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments are in Exodus chapter 20. All right, all the thou shalt nots are there in Exodus 20. Exodus 19, it says this. He says, you have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. He's rehearsing for them how He's delivered them. Now, if you will carefully listen to me and keep my covenant, you will be my own possession out of all the peoples, although the whole earth is mine. Now remember, we've been looking at how the whole earth is God's, right? God is the king, but He is redeeming people who have turned over their worship to other gods. God always wanted to share rule. God was never interested in being alone. He gave rule to people over the earth. And as they began to worship other gods, they began to look like those other gods. And the world became a place of false worship, false idols, and it turned into a wicked and perverted society as they rebelled against God. And so He's rehearsing to the nation of Israel what's going on. He says, and you will be my kingdom of priests and my holy nation. You will be my kingdom of priests and my holy nation. This is repeated all throughout 1st and 2nd Peter. Peter writes to the group of people, and he wants to let them know that they are to be a kingdom of priests, a holy nation, a holy people. And God's plan all along was for the nation of Israel not to be isolated, not to say, hey, none of you guys can come in. What's a priest's job? To connect people to God. To connect people to God. That's the priest's job, to connect people to God. And so the nation of Israel was to be a kingdom of priests. They were to help other people know who the one true God is. And that's why Peter calls Christians priests. You say, I'm not a priest. Occasionally, in our society, people have just a Catholic background. And so they'll meet me and they'll talk to me and they'll call me Father Bob, Priest Bob. I get all of those. Sometimes I just smile and just answer the question. Father Bob. I always kind of feel kind of weird. And so in today's society, because of different religions, we have a hard time understanding what this is. But God's plan was for Christians, for believers to be priests. Oh, not get a robe and not go, not baptize babies and not be in the Catholic Church. God's plan was for believers to represent Him to the world, to help all people become believers. So all people can help connect people to Jesus. You see, I'm not a priest in the sense of at the Catholic Church, but I am a priest not because I'm a pastor. I was a priest before I was a pastor because I'm a believer in Jesus, and my job as a believer in Jesus is to help connect other people to Jesus. And that's all believers' jobs. God wants us to be a priesthood, a holy nation. And that was what he wanted the nation of Israel to do. He said, I got to get a group of people to go let the rest of the world know that they too can be my people. He didn't look at them and go, oh, your DNA's fantastic. I want you because you're these people. No, God never cared about any of that. He didn't care. There's all this debate going around about the nation of Israel today, and here's the question for today's world. Do they know Jesus? And here's the deal. If you're from the nation of Israel, you can know Jesus. And if you're an American, you can know Jesus. And if you're a Chinese person, you can know Jesus. And all of us that are believers in Jesus, it's our job to help them know who Jesus is as priests and people. A holy nation. Then God spoke all these words. After he redeemed them, then he spoke, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the place of slavery. And he goes on to say, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt have no other gods before me. He gives all of those commands after he redeemed them. A guardian provides structure and proximity, but it cannot provide permanence. Guardians are there to help for a time being, to keep watch care, to keep safe. It would be like a full-time babysitter, like a nanny. Somebody who has power for the time being. The law was meant to guard them, to help them form as a people. It was never the permanent thing for them. Why? Because laws don't work permanently. Love works permanently. Love never fails. Most people that get married, they say, hey, I ain't going to cheat on you. Some people get in front of a church and they say, for better, for worse, and sickness and in health. And they go on. And they say, I will only be with you. I promise. I promise. And their promise doesn't mean anything at a certain point if love doesn't take over. If love isn't there. The covenant aimed at restored relationships. And so the covenant's aim that he said, hey, I want you to keep my laws and I will be with you, was to help restore a relationship, but it wasn't permanent. He says, now if you will carefully listen to me and keep my covenant, you will be my own possession out of all peoples, although the whole earth is mine. And you will be my kingdom of priests, right? He says, I want you to listen to me. I want you to be with me. Israel is called to embody God's reign so that the nations might know what God is like. He says, I want you to be my kingdom of priests so the whole world knows what I'm like because they need me. Because they need me, so I need you to live this way, and the law is going to help you understand how a kingdom people live. A kingdom people do live a certain way. Right? I mean, again, a person who is concerned about other people in society isn't going to run 100 miles an hour up and down these streets. Right? Laws are good because they help us, but they don't bring us to the fullness. They don't bring us to the full point. They don't bring us all the way. Then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. They will rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, the livestock, the whole earth, and the creatures that crawl on the earth. God's whole plan was never to do it alone. It was to rule with you and I. He wanted to share rule. That's amazing. It's amazing when somebody wants to share rule, especially when the one they're sharing rule with is far less than them. And God says, well, I'll share anyway. I like you. I love you. I give you decision-making powers. I give you authority to rule. And that was God's plan, for us to rule and reign with him. So God created man in his own image. We see it again and again. God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply. He said, I want more rulers. I want to share with more people. I want more. I want to share rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and every creature that crawls on the earth. But sin came in. Sin came in. There was a law. The law kept them near Christ. What was the law? Don't eat that tree. When they broke the law, when they violated the law, they became separated from Christ. Right? They hid. They hid. And so the law brings us close to Christ. It doesn't keep us with Christ. If God's presence had been right there at the tree when the serpent came, they would have been good. They would have been good. The law only kept them near. It wasn't the permanent place. Why? They ate it. God wasn't there. God shows up. They hide. God came looking for them. So the Lord God called out to man and said to him, where are you? And he said, I heard you in the garden and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. Does it mean that God wasn't aware of what was going on? Does it mean that God's not like omnipresent and doesn't see? But Adam and Eve they didn't sense his presence because they didn't invite him in. And God's presence wasn't the same then as it is today. Then he asked, who told you that you were naked? Right? We have all of these problems happening because the law was a guardian. It was a keeper. I remember I was 12 years old. I was the oldest of 3 kids. My brother 15 months younger than me, and my sister 4 years younger than me. And we were 12, and my mom decided that we needed one more summer of babysitter. 3.5 hours a day or so, we had a babysitter. Do you know how often I did not listen to the babysitter that summer? She was 16 and I was 12 and her brothers were my friends and I did not care what she said. I did not care one bit. Because the guardian can only do so much for so long. The keeper can only do so much for so long. It only has power to restrain for a while. It's meant to draw us near, but it's not meant to take care of all of it. The man replied, the woman you gave to be with me. You see, we have a problem. The law didn't do it. The law didn't keep it. Eventually, and it caused a great strain. So the Lord God asked the woman, what have you done? Right? We have all of this going on. The law causes strain. The fall, well, it went too far. My tapper's not working. Go back one for me up there. It's sort of working. The fall fractures the foundational relationships. There are 3 foundational relationships in society. You with God, you with yourself, and you with others. And the fall broke all of them. The fall, when man sinned, when they rejected God's law, broke all of those. Immediately, they started to hide from God, right? God shows up, they run and hide. With yourself, I was in 5th grade. In 5th grade in our Christian school, it was the first year that they would give demerits for misbehavior in class. I got a lot of them. They were these little green sheets of paper. And the top on this little 3x5 size sheet of paper, it said demerit slip. And then it said infraction. And the teacher would write what you did. And then below it, it said parent signature. Then the teacher would take the demerit and staple it to your steno pad. Your steno pad was designed for all your homework to be written down in it. And the school had a rule through 8th grade. that you had to carry a steno pad, and your parent had to sign the steno pad every day. So that you would write down your homework in the steno pad, you would bring your steno pad to the teacher would initial that your homework was correct, that you had written it down, then your parents had to sign the steno pad that you had your homework done. So this was the routine process every day. My mom would see the steno pad. So the demerit stapled right next to the homework, or right below it, was right there. Now, I told you I got lots of demerits in 5th grade. I had had bunches of them by midway through the year. And my dad said, "You better not get another demerit. I'm tired of this." And he said, "You will be receiving," and I knew my bottom would hurt. I went to school that day and I was like, there's no way. I'm good today. Like, I'm doing everything the teacher says. I'm not going to talk. I'm going to pay attention. When it's seat work time, I'm going to do my seat work. I am going to get my work done. I am going to obey. I'm going to do all of it. Yeah, I made it to about 3 hours in the school day. Then I forgot. I'm a boy. No boy should be strapped to a desk for that many hours. I can't even do it now. I got to do something else. I can do this for an hour and a half and do this for 2 hours. You want me to concentrate for 4? Get out of here. My maximum concentration time is 3 hours, the length of a football game. And then that's it. So I get this demerit and I'm terrified. And so I come home. My dad works second shift, 3 to 11. I wasn't really scared of my mom, but I was scared that my mom would tell my dad, because my dad said if he has demerits, I need to see him. And so I got home. I went into my room, and I flipped to the back of the paper where no words were written, but the demerit was stapled on the front. And I got to that little staple fold in the back. And thankfully, my nails weren't fully clipped. And I reached in there and I pried that so slowly. Is the longest attention span I've ever had. I'm pulling that staple back. And I'm pulling that other side of that staple back. And and you've heard my art stories. I'm no good at anything like that. But I was good that day. And I pulled that good bad that day. And I pulled that staple out ever so slowly. But then I was looking at the 2 holes. I was smart and dumb all wrapped in one. I'm looking at those 2 holes. And so I began to doodle on purpose all around those. Now, I knew I would get in trouble for doodling in my steno pad, but I figured I would just get a correction for that. I did get a correction for that, but nothing harsh. My mom signed the steno pad. But you have to take the steno pad back to the teacher the next day to see that your parents signed it when you're getting your homework and when you're writing down your new assignments for the day, right? For the next day. So I knew that. So I took the demerit back. I lined it perfectly up both the holes, slid the staple back through, pushed it back down. But it hasn't been signed yet. Oh man, I'm evil, I know. And creative genius like Jay, some of our favorite people on the Minions. And but now my next problem is the demerit's not signed. But I had seen, buddy. I seen my dad sign enough demerits, so I signed my dad's signature. It worked. I was like, I have got to be good. I got away with this one. For 2 days, I moved it in and out of the thing to hide it, so it wouldn't be there, and it somehow survived. I don't know. There's nothing worse than when you continue to get away with sin. I got another one, in another one. Now here's the thing. You don't even know who my 5th grade teacher is yet. He's married to my much older cousin. We called him Uncle Dan. He goes to church with my parents and me and us. We're all connected. He says to my dad, man, he's sure been getting in a lot of trouble lately. And my dad says, I don't know about any of this. He goes and talks to my mom. She's like, I haven't seen any demerits. The church is connected to the school building. It's all on the same property. It was like 25 acres. I mean, lots of ground there. He walks several hundred yards from the church down to the school, goes to his schoolroom where he has since decided to start collecting demerits, and pulls out ones that I have signed and brings them to my dad. And my dad says, I haven't signed those. Do you know, for 3 weeks, I hardly slept. When I finally did get caught, I was like, because sin fractures the relationship with yourself. It fractures the relationship with itself, and it only causes you to spiral further and further and further, hiding and covering up, lying and cheating and stealing. And when you're in 5th grade, you can recover from it. But you can't very well as you get older. And you know the consequences are greater and greater. And so there's greater lengths to hide and cover things up. Because the fall fractures foundational relationship with God, with self, and with others. Immediately we see Adam blaming Eve. Are you going to tell me, the Bible tells us they lived for more than 900 years after that. Are you going to tell me that Adam didn't hear about that for the next 900 years? You blame me! Well, you ate it. Well, you were right there. We could have still been in the garden. I had to work all day because you ate the fruit. You should have stopped me. You were right there. You big idiot. I guarantee you they were going back and forth because sin always fractures relationships. And so the law can never get the job done. I pray not only for these. So this is Jesus' prayer right before he goes to the cross. Right before he goes to the cross, he says, I pray not only for these. That means his disciples. I pray not only for my disciples, but also for those who believe in me through their word. Again, what was believers in Jesus' job to do? To let other people know so they could become believers in Jesus. I pray not only for these, but also for those who believe in me through their word. May they all be one as you, Father, are in me and I am in you. May they also be in us so that the world may believe you sent me. He says, how's the world going to believe that Jesus came? Because of the disciples. We always are like, believe because of the empty tomb. No one believes in an empty tomb unless they believe other people's lives have been changed by the empty tomb. No one believes because we say it's a historical fact. They believe because our lives are different and because we're one, because we're unified. He says, I have given them the glory you have given me. Man, God's incredible. So that they may be one as we are one. I am in them and you are in me, so that they may be made completely one. Jesus wasn't in the believers in the Old Testament before he came. The law was just to keep them near. The law was to keep them close. The law was to keep them so they could have a relationship. They would travel to the tabernacle and the temple, and they would bring their sacrifices, and the law would keep them close. But things were getting ready to change. He says that the world may know that you have sent me and have loved them as you have loved me. And so they have this law, but the law wasn't good enough. And so God says, we'll have a king. And I'm going to give you a really good king, a king after my own heart. But the throne was promised, but the kings could not handle the power. And so we see when your time comes and you will rest with your ancestors, I will raise up after you your descendant who will come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house for my name. God is writing this to David, and he's saying, I'm going to establish your throne, and then after you is going to come your son Solomon, and he'll build me a house. And I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father. He says, I'll take care of Solomon, and he will be my son. When he does wrong, I will discipline him with the rod of men and blows from mortals. God says, I'm going to use people to discipline Solomon when he does wrong. But my faithful love will never leave him, as it did when I removed it from Saul, whom I removed from before you. So the nation of Israel's first king was Saul. And the nation of Israel clamored for Saul. They wanted Saul. They wanted a king like other kingdoms. They weren't satisfied with the God being the king. They wanted a physical king that they could see. And they said, we want a king. God said, oh, you do you? All right, here's the one you want. The mighty, powerful one, the big, strong one, the one head and shoulders above all. Kind of sounds opposite from who God picked. Abraham. God picked the weak and the old. They said, no, we want the big and the strong and the powerful because he'll lead us to glory and to victory. God said, no, I think you're confusing. That's what I do. That's what I do. I am the big, mighty, powerful, and strong one. But I share my rule with you. They said, we want the big, strong king. And what did the big, strong king do? The very thing God told them they would do. He said, he'll take your wives, he'll take your sons, deploy them for battle, and he'll tax you to death. Kind of sounds like our government. In most governments, because there's one king who wants us to share rule, but underneath of him. But faithful love will never leave him as it did when I removed it from Saul, who I removed for you. Your house and kingdom will endure before me forever, and your throne will be established forever. So we have David, right? This mighty, powerful king. Like, look how he's chose. So Jesse sent for him. He had beautiful eyes and a healthy, handsome appearance. Then the Lord said, anoint him, for he is the one. So Samuel took up the horn of oil, anointed him in the presence of his brothers, and the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully on David from that day forward. Then Samuel left out and went to Ramah. So Samuel anoints David as king of Israel, but Saul is still the king. Some of you watched the movie that came out this winter with David. It was a cartoon. It was a great movie. But David, in that movie, and in real life, is on the run from Saul. Saul wants to end him. He's tired of David getting credit. He's tired of David and all the people wanting to follow him, and so Saul's on the hunt for David, and David runs for his life. As David's being tracked down, he goes and hides in a cave, in a deep cave. And Saul goes into the cave to rest. And as Saul is alone in the cave and resting, perhaps using the restroom in private, maybe sleeping, and men outside guarding the cave, he doesn't know that David's on the inside with many of his men. And they say, there's your chance, David. He's hunting you. He's coming after you. And God has promised you the throne. And God, they're encouraging him, saying, God has delivered him into your hand. And David says, I will not touch him. I won't touch him. I'm not going to harm him. God has given him the throne. And David relies faithfully on King Saul, or relies faithfully on God to deliver him from Saul, not do it through his own strength, not do it through his own power. And David becomes a king, and the people are like, yay, we got a good king. We got a great king. And David leads the people to victory after victory after victory. And the nation of Israel expands and grows, and God delivers them from their enemies. You know that before he ever came king, he conquered Goliath, and he did many other great feats. But David fails miserably. One day when he is supposed to be leading the troops to battle, he stays home. And he witnesses another man's wife bathing and takes her, commits adultery, ends up killing her husband to cover it up. And this was supposed to be the faithful king. Because the law couldn't do it, and the kings couldn't do it. The human kings came up short, the law comes up short. The promise of the throne revealed God's faithfulness, but the failure of the kings revealed humanity's instability. Without God, we are all unstable. We all come up short. The psalm writer wrote this: God, give your justice to the king and your righteousness to the king's son. He will judge your people with righteousness and your afflicted ones with justice. May the mountains bring well-being to the people and the hills righteousness. May he vindicate the afflicted among the people, help the poor and crush the oppressor. David did much of that until he became the oppressor, until he became vindictive instead of vindicating. He says, for he will rescue the poor who cry out and the afflicted who have no helper. And David, who was a really good man, had a colossal, moral, evil failure. He will have pity on the poor and helpless and save the lives of the poor until his greed takes over, because the law wasn't enough even for the king. He will redeem them from oppression and violence, for their lives are precious in his sight, until he oppresses a woman and then kills her husband. But the prophets write this: the nation of Israel began a downward spiral from that day forward. Solomon was good, but he didn't live up to his father David, and he began to worship false gods and took many, many wives as his own and made deals with foreign nations that he had no business making, and the nation of Israel ends up in exile. God sends in these other nations like he promised to do, to judge his son. But Jeremiah writes this. He says, look, the days are coming. This is the Lord's declaration. When I will raise up a righteous branch for David, he will reign wisely as a king and administer justice and righteousness in the land. He says, I'm going to raise up a righteous branch. He says, the days are coming. They've ended up in slavery here. They've been taken off to Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar the king has come in. Historical figure, mind you, by the way. He has come in. He has taken them captive. And Jeremiah is writing for hope. He says, the day is coming. I will raise up somebody from the line of David. In his days, Judah will be saved and Israel will dwell securely. This is the name he will be called. He says, who is this king? He says his name is the Lord is our righteousness. The Lord is our righteousness. See, David had his own, but he needed one that wasn't from him. He needed God's righteousness. And the Lord was that promised future king. The exile, when the kings failed, proved that proximity was not enough. It wasn't good enough to have a tabernacle. It wasn't good enough to have a temple. It wasn't good to have a king, even a good king. It wasn't enough. Then, the glory of the Lord, what happened, Ezekiel tells us, as they failed, then the glory of the Lord moved away from the threshold of the temple and stopped above the cherubim. The cherubim lifted their wings and ascended from the earth right before my eyes. The wheels were beside them as they went. Some little bit of imagery stuff happening here, but then the glory of God of Israel was above them, and it stopped at the entrance of the eastern gate of the Lord's house. They needed God's presence. God's presence had to be there. And he replied, my presence will go with you, and I will give you rest. God's presence must be there. The law can keep you. Kings can help you, but it's never enough. Moses said this to God, if your presence does not go, don't make us go from here. How will it be known that I and your people have found favor with you unless you go with us? Moses had it right. He said, this isn't going to be enough. The law isn't going to get it done. God, we need you to go with us. I and your people will be distinguished by this from all other people on the face of the earth. He says, we got to have your presence. I will give you, Ezekiel wrote this, he says, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. I will remove your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. And here's the key. I will place my spirit within you and cause you to follow my statutes and carefully observe my ordinances. You will live in the land that I gave your ancestors. You will be my people, and I will be your God. Daniel wrote this. He's in exile. He's in Babylon. He's taken as a slave, and they're longing for a good king. He says, I continued watching in the night visions, and suddenly one like a son of man was coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was escorted before him. He was given dominion and glory and a kingdom so that those of every people, nation, and language should serve him. It's going to be a different king, an all-powerful king. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will not be destroyed. The law drew people near Christ. Kings were to help guide and shepherd, but they came up short because they weren't the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And they failed without the presence of God. God's made a promise to those people that one day a righteous king would come to live inside of believers. We'll unpack that a little bit more next week. But I want you to know that you can strive to be good for God, and you can strive to make a difference, and you can promise even more sincerely than I did in 5th grade. And I can promise you, I was sincere. Haven't you made promises that you were going to make it next time? God, I'll do better. Don't work. God's presence works. God in you and with you. And you recognizing his presence when he's there. There's the difference. There's the difference. I promise you, you will be left empty if you think this church will fulfill the whole for you. It will not. It might be something God wants you to do with him, but not to get him. Not to get him. He'll come to all those who will believe and receive him. His presence is here. He made a way. He was shaping and forming a people, helping us understand that without him, we can't do anything. We've said it over the last few weeks. Autonomy. Meaning without God will land you in a disaster, even if it's attempts to do good without God. No, with God. Because what does God do? He brings in love. And love never fails. Whether there be prophecies, they shall fail. Whether there be tongues, they shall cease. For we know in part and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect is come, the Apostle Paul tells us, love never fails. God is love. Love keeps me faithful to my wife. Love keeps me faithful to God. Not fear of God's retribution. Doesn't work. Hell doesn't scare people straight. Doesn't work. Oh, can you scare a little kid with hell? Sure. But you know what they need? They need to know God is love. They need to know God loves them and will receive them if they'll receive Him into their heart and life. And it's the same thing you and I need. We need to operate from a motive of love. What are the 2 commands? Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And you do that when you receive Christ as your Savior, then He can move in and He can change the heart of stone into a heart of flesh and live with the believer and empower them to live that out. My own strength and my own power fails every time. God's love, as He shapes and forms me from the inside, changes everything.